Okay, well, I think we should go ahead and get started, and people will just continue to join us. Thank you all for joining us on a weekend no less. I'm Cheryl Pop, the owner of Sausalito Books by the Bay, an independent community bookstore on the waterfront in downtown Sausalito. We are delighted today to welcome a very special Ukrainian guest, Ukrainian author Slava Svitova, who is also co-founder of Creative Women Publishing. And she's joining us live from Kyiv, where she has remained with her daughter despite her war-torn country. So we're so honored, and it's just so special to have you with us across all these miles. This is the beauty of technology and Zoom. Slava's Enterprise is the very first and only publishing house in the Ukraine to exclusively feature women authors, and she herself has written and published books for both children and adults. And Slava, I just learned this today, means glory in Ukrainian, correct?
Yes,
Is that right?
it
Yeah,
is.
I think that's
Yes.
wonderful. Yeah, and you are glorious, so it's perfect.
Thank you.
She's going to be in conversation with Sausalito's own Cynthia Nimmo, who is the chief strategist for She the People. Cynthia has so many accolades to her name, but I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are a lot. She is an equity facilitator and advisor focused on developing strategies for high-performing leadership teams and community impact. More importantly, she has been a global leader for gender equality for over 20 years, establishing partnerships that are between corporations, philanthropic organizations, the government, nonprofit sectors, basically to ensure that women have a platform to voice their solutions for improving communities. She was president and CEO of Women's Funding Network, where she grew the organization into a $400 million global alliance, was also at the helm of the Bay Area's Alliance for Girls, a nonprofit focused on empowering girls and breaking down barriers. And she currently serves on the board of her alma mater, Santa Clara University. So Cynthia is an expert at working with leaders across cultures and generations to improve the lives of women and girls. And she's proven that over and over again and has been mentoring Slava for the last 6 months. So these two remarkable women are going to be in conversation about their experience, and as well as what's been going on in the Ukraine, what's the publishing and writing world like there. And I think it's going to be a very inspirational and dynamic exchange, after which we will have an opportunity for some Q&A. So if you have a question, I think everyone knows how the chat or Q&A box works. Please enter that in, and we can also unmute you at the end if necessary. But we look forward to your questions once they finish their conversation. So ladies, thank you again for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this, and just so delighted and honored to have you both here and in conversation. So take it away, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just also want to thank Cheryl, because as she said, she owns the local bookstore here, and she is so much more than a bookstore owner. She's a tremendous businesswoman in her own right. And what I've always appreciated, besides having my own love of books, is she hosts incredible events. And she's the person I thought of to host this when after having these months of conversations with Slava, said I would love to bring her voice out into the world, and of course do it by Zoom, since Slava's calling in from Kyiv. And Cheryl was the person I thought of, and I'm just so grateful, Cheryl. So thank you for your time on this. Before we jump in, I'm going to give a little context to this conversation. I, as Cheryl mentioned, have been in the field of gender equity for 2 decades now, and I have interviewed dozens and dozens of women who are making positive change around the world. And I remember a year and a half ago, I was working with UN Women, and we had a big campaign called Generation Equality, which was going to culminate in a conference for 50,000 people, heads of state, leaders from around the world. And we were having a conversation there about who are we going to invite to be speakers? Who are the women that we want to really speak and motivate and mobilize others? And someone in the room said, there is a Greta in every corner of the room. And what she meant by that is, the media will always have its darlings, and that's important. The Gretas and the Malalas and the Mackenzie Scotts. And the reality is that every day, every moment, there are women doing incredible work from all walks of life to make positive change in the world. And so you might think, well, what does this have to do with book publishing? What you're going to hear today, though, is that Slava, by having this particular kind of publishing company, is changing culture, is changing gender norms in the Ukraine, is changing how people think and value women. And so we're going to hear more about that. And the way that I was connected to her is through an organization for which I'm a global advisor called Women Leaders for the World. And they put a call out, this was last fall, to say a woman who has left the Ukraine is forming this, I guess, match. She's going to match up professional women here, excuse me, with women who either have remained in the Ukraine or have had to flee so that they can continue to network and learn the way many of us do. And through that process, I was connected with Slava. And over the months, well, from the very beginning, I was just so thankful. And she and I have talked about this, to be connected with her, because every conversation we had, and many of which were by candlelight, or not even possible because no electricity or air raids are going off, I was inspired every single time. And I thought, I just want to find a way to share her story. And so please join me in officially welcoming Slava, who is calling in from Kyiv. And so those of you who are in California, like me, where it's a beautiful morning out, for Slava, it's nighttime. And so the other reason why we're doing this on a Saturday morning. So thanks, everybody. Slava, despite all the hardship of living in a war zone, and nobody needs to be reminded that the war continues, you have chosen over and over again to stay. Though you've told me that many of your friends, your loved ones, employees have relocated. I wonder if we can start by you sharing with us why you choose this.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you, Cheryl, for giving this place for me to talk today. I'm really happy and honored to be here and to be the voice for many Ukrainian women and many Ukrainian men that, like the whole nation, a little bit of what it feels like to live in the middle of the wartime and to try to lead the normal life as hard as you can. The war came out as a surprise. No matter how many publications there were, and the USA government was sending messages to our president that the Russians are standing, that there are many soldiers, there are many weapons at the border, we could not believe. None of my friends could not believe. We were joking. We were saying, how do you imagine the large-scale war now? Do you think like there would be missiles shooting at Kyiv or any other Ukrainian cities? But this is ridiculous. This won't happen. But this is what happened, unfortunately. And the decision of staying, you know that while in shock, we tend to either freeze, fight, or run away. I probably reacted in the way that I froze at some point, maybe during the 3 days or something. I stayed with my parents, my daughter was with me, and I couldn't believe what was going on. A lot of people were fleeing from the country. And as the days passed by, this inner feeling that something that I was doing and staying in my country, this was right. And this feeling grew stronger. And it's impossible to explain to you. How is it possible to explain what love is? When we love someone, we just do, with all the drawbacks and advantages and disadvantages. How is it possible to explain what love towards the land is? It's impossible to explain. It's just the way you suddenly feel that you belong here. This is where your home is. And I did not choose to leave. Probably if the situation got worse, or maybe some I don't know, something in Kyiv, but Kyiv was in danger, I still felt like I was safe here. I still felt like this is my home and my flat and my land and my district, and I could be safe here. Even right now, with all the air raid alerts that we have. Sometimes we have them 5 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. You never know what happens. It's like you are undeliberately and without any permission or your own will, you are playing this Russian roulette, because you don't know where the missile would hit, which kind of building or flat, and what will happen. But it's been a year and a half of the large-scale war, and we've learned to live with that already. A lot of Ukrainians stayed because they felt like this, and it's very difficult to explain the reason, really. Sometimes you just feel that this is all you can do. That's the only choice you have, and you choose it.
Thank you, Slava. You know, I'm reminded, and I wrote this down, but you said during one of our conversations, we were talking about loss, because of course there's been so much loss. And so I want to ask you this one before we shift over to talking about books and book publishing. But you said so many of us are suffering from loss, and it's not just death, it's the loss of feeling safe and the loss of your normal life. And so there is no normal, as what you're describing. And so what is it that has replaced that?
I can only speak for myself, of course, because I don't know other people's choices and feelings and how they cope with the new reality that has found all of us, right? When I look at my life now, I realize that the hardest thing for me for all of the time was to live here and now. I usually lived in the past, trying to analyze what I did right, what I did wrong, what I could do in a different way. Or I always was in the future, my dreams, my future plans, how I managed to achieve them, and so on and so forth. But my life is right here. And right now, this very brutal, very dark a year and a half of the large-scale war has finally taught me to live here and now, and to take pleasures in very small things, like a cup of coffee, hot water, a dialogue with a friend, a new book. And I think the human's mind is very adjustable. And the main thing was not to lose the will to live, not to lose the feeling of life, you know, because a lot of people might feel depressed or scared, but the most difficult thing for me was to accept and embrace the new reality. Because we all know that if we have hopes that this war ends tomorrow or in 10 days, and it suddenly doesn't end in 10 days or tomorrow, we might feel very bad or depressed. So we, Ukrainians, have to learn how to live in this new reality. And I think the majority of us has managed to do that. We live. That's our life.
Well, it seems like a very simple sentiment, and one that we all should pay attention to. And it's sad that that is, you know, it's having to come out of this reality. And I'm just happy that you're sharing that with us. And I think it's part of what was inspiring me during all of our conversations, because despite what you're describing, this needing to stay in the moment and stay, you know, just focusing on right now, you were moving forward with your company, which is not easy in normal times. And what we talked a lot about is within the Ukraine, what is the culture? What is the feeling about women's voices or positions or books? And how you've managed to do this is a really important part of this story. And so I wonder if you can talk to us about why it's important to you, despite all of the hardships there's living in the war-torn country, but also some of the things we talked about are imposter syndrome and how hard it is for, can be for women to lead or lead in their own way or carve a space for themselves, or talk about finances or any of the things that are required when you're going to have a business. But every time we talked, your face lit up when we spoke about these books. And so it would be wonderful to hear from you why it's so important, why you're doing this specifically.
Thank you so much for this question. It's unbelievable that I can call myself that I manage the publishing house right now, because I used to be a very good girl and I was afraid of everything. And I had this imposter syndrome when you have hundreds of voices in your head telling you that you're not worthy enough, you're not good enough, you cannot do that because, and many, many other reasons. In order to understand why I grasped this publishing house so much at wartime, it's also necessary to look back in time to see the little story behind that. And the little story goes like this. There were 4 women, my fellows. They were not my friends. We met at the kitchen and just shared our fears and dreams for a year. After that, we realized that we are compatible, and our talents and our skills help us to build something really nice. So we opened the Creative Women's Space at the heart of Kyiv, and it existed for 2 wonderful years, and it became a center of feminism, women empowerment. There were many events, there were a lot of things, good things were going on there. But then suddenly the COVID times started, and we had to close down our space. And all of the wonderful people who went there and who knew us, they were suffering a lot. We were all scared. We didn't know what will happen. So we closed the door of the Creative Women's Space, but we thought, how could we take our values? How could we take what we believe in and sort of transform it into something of online format, so that it lives and it continues gathering nice people around it. So we thought, why not open in a publishing house? We don't need the office. We can manage online, and we can try and do that. And so we did, and we opened the publishing house at the moment where there was a national lockdown, and people were looking at us and they were amazed, and they were saying things like, are you crazy guys? It's the national lockdown. Businesses are closing down, restaurants are closing down, you're opening the publishing house, you must be crazy. But we did that. We had the there was such a platform which is called The Big Idea, and you could go there and you could introduce your idea, and people would donate money for that if your idea is worthy. So we had this idea of our first book, because we had the big idea of a publishing, we didn't have money for the startup. So the idea was to publish a book. It's the collection of women's stories for different topics which are not comfortable to talk about in the Ukrainian society. Your relationship with your body, the toxic relationship with someone close, maternity leave, career, how to change the sphere of your professional interest, how to accept your body when you see that you're growing old, etc., etc. And we were very surprised how fast we collected the necessary sum of money, and we published the book. And we also spread the book to the library free of charge. I think it was around 500 copies, because we wanted that book to be read. And so then the war started, and we had many plans. And when the war started, the 7 founders, co-founders of the publishing house, they all had to flee, because we have different. Someone wants to stay, and someone feels like it's not safe to stay. And so I was faced with the reality when, if everyone leaves and if I don't go on, we lose what we have managed to build. We lose the reputation, we lose the trust of people, we lose our books, we lose everything. And I just couldn't let that happen. So I was very scared, because I had to do something I've never done before. I was all alone. I felt like I was all alone, and it was not easy. It was not easy, but when you believe in something very strongly, and when you see that Russian soldiers, what they do on the occupied territories with our people, and how they burn Ukrainian books, and they literally did that, you realize that, oh my God, I'm not just publishing books, I'm doing something a lot bigger. If they burn our books, we will just go on and publish them more and more. And that became as a mission, that became as a mission. And Cynthia, I was so grateful, and I am grateful to you, because you helped me to find this focus. You told me that the story I have could inspire many other people. And you told me that we can never be sure how much of what we do or what we say can influence on other people. And we discussed those ripples on the water. And I realized, oh my God, I feel like I've lost everything, but I still have myself, and I still have a story to share. So as long as I have it, I feel like I'm invincible. I will just do my work. I will do it here, and I will try to do it as good as I can. And this is my story. I call myself a woman who publishes books in Ukrainian language at wartime. This is my little legend. I had to recreate myself from the scratch. Yeah.
Thank you, Slava. And again, just like with all of our conversations, it just, there was a lot of emotion that wells up by listening to you, and I'm sure by you speaking. Can you share with us a little more about, so I think that's, you talked about why you wanted to do this and keep it going, but you also specifically wanted to focus on books written by women.
Yes.
And you said to me at one point, I want a writer to think if she's published, then maybe I could get published too. That if you have a story to tell, it gives you a chance to be heard and to speak up. And so it seemed to me that this was sort of your way of creating a platform. And I had questions about that because, of course, every country has different cultures and beliefs about gender and the place for men and the place for women. And you shared with me about that. But I wonder if you can talk a bit about what that's looked like in Ukraine. Like, why is it so important to publish a book or any books by women?
That's a nice story. That's a nice question. And generally, I realized that there's always a man's perspective on anything, and there's the women's perspective. And sometimes, like, we need stories that are told by women because they show us the world in a totally different perspective, because the men and the women are so different. And it's not just physiologically, it's about the brain work, it's about anything. So the world needs women's stories, because women notice, and women are eager to save the world, no matter how loud it sounds. But if you take a look at NGOs, you would probably see a lot of women there. If you look at the social activists, you would probably notice more women than men there. And I'm saying that not to like disregard or disrespect the men who are involved in these spheres. I'm just saying that women are more prone to this saving of the world thing. So if we speak about Ukrainian women, I could say that we in Ukraine have a lot of shift towards accepting feminism, towards giving more rights to women. Women are free to choose anything in Ukraine. They are free to choose who they love, whether they want to have children or not, what kind of education they want, or maybe they want the second or the third education. Women are choose to buy any kind of accommodation or have a car, open the business, do whatever. But while working with women, what I have realized that even though there are so many possibilities right now, there are many inner barriers inside of the women that just stop them. A lot of women still think that they are not worthy enough. A lot of women still think that they don't have enough education or not enough skills to go and do this, to go into politics, to open business, whatsoever. That is why I think that having books like these and having women read those books, once you read the book, you get ideas. And once you get ideas, you have many questions. And when you have many questions, you go out there and start finding the answers. And when you find the answers, and when you see the good epitome of a woman who has managed to achieve something, you get inspired by her example a lot. In our little portfolio, we have the collection of essays I mentioned. We have the book, which is specifically created for the beginner writers, because to inspire them, to show them that you don't need to be very much talented. Talent means nothing if you do not work hard and if you do not strive to achieve what you want to. We also published the book, which is devoted to the period. And it's a very taboo topic in Ukraine, and we were very much hated for this book. But I say, this is not the book about the period. This is the book about how to be a woman and how to embrace all your natural processes and things about yourself. And this is also about the Soviet past, when women were told to feel insecure, when those red, scary days were disrespected. And this is a very difficult experience that we need to talk more about in the society. We also support the beginner writers, and this is the collection of feministic stories of a very successful lady who never had a book before, but now she has it, and we give her a platform for that. I really think that women in any country are incredible, and what they need is they need a little bit more confidence in who they are and what they do. They need more encouragement. And I realized that whenever women get together and when they start sharing the stories, they realize that they have more in common than, you know, they don't need to fight who is the best. They just share the stories, they can relate to them, they can support each other, they can make wonderful collaborations, as we did in this publishing house. There are 7 co-founders. I would have never done this by myself. So it's nice to be in the women's circle. It's nice to read books, because women who read are dangerous, because they start having ideas and one day they go out there and start implementing them. And that's what I badly need. I feel that Ukraine needs a lot of women. A lot of women left the country and we want them back. And I don't know what we can do rather than just keep sharing our stories.
Slava, I love the quote you just said. I don't know if it's your own. Women who read are dangerous.
No, that's not my own.
Oh, well, it's really good. I
Yeah.
love it. I have a few other questions, but I'm very curious now when you say this book that you wrote about periods, about menstruation, that you were
Yes.
hated
Yes.
for it. Can you tell us, like, what did that look like? Who hated
Yeah.
you all? And
Yes. It was a great and a wonderful essayist. Her name is Olga Kari. And what she did, she actually did a very immense investigation. She did the questionnaire of she questioned more than 30 women on their menstruation experiences, starting from the first experience, whether they were informed by their mothers, for instance, or grandmothers, and then leading into the puberty, into the youth, and so on and so forth. And we realized that a lot of these menstruation experiences are very negative and very painful, because there's a lot of shame about it. So this book is a collection of essays on different myths around the menstruation, on different women's experiences, on how they were learning to accept this as something normal, as a part of the natural process. Yes. And yeah, the book is still, like, you know, it's still very, it's a taboo book for many, because they see this very red book cover and a lot of people immediately start having this stereotypical thing and they start being very aggressive. They don't accept it. But I know that what is the other way of turning people's attention to some of the important topics? You should just go out there and start talking about it. There's no other chances. So yes, it's an investigation of experience, and the whole collection of different stories connected to periods.
So I want to talk about you being a business owner, and you've shared a bit about how this started and what it looked like, but quite a lot of what we talked about in our sessions was challenges that you had and many women in my experience have about maybe delegating to others, or saying no when you already feel overworked, or what to do when you're underpaid. And you said at one point you realized that you don't have to be poor to do this, because initially you were, basically doing it as a volunteer.
Yeah.
And, this is common around the world. And you made a good point also that even if you look kind of in the nonprofit or civil society sector, you tend to see a lot of women there who are wanting to make all this positive change. And frequently what that can lead to is, the work isn't so valued, though it's critical. But in your case, it is a business. You need resources to create this product. And so maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your journey, because we did talk quite a lot of what this was going to look like. You now, or at least then, were heading this team. Many of them were no longer there in the Ukraine. So now you had this fully remote team and you were finding it a bit challenging. So share a little bit about your growth as a business owner.
Oh, thank you for this question. I still call it a very brave experience of mine, because I'm still learning and I still do not identify myself as a businesswoman. I'm still like, a disciple. I'm still learning a lot. But in order to lead a business, you don't need to be someone who does everything. You don't need to be that superpower woman who's doing the finances, who's doing the marketing, who's doing the sales, and who's communicating in the social media. But you need to find people who are good enough and who have the necessary skills to delegate. And you need to have this helicopter view of the whole picture to manage, to plan, to see what you did was good, and to be able to analyze what you did was not so good. I see that we've grown a lot, because at first there were just 2 books in our portfolio, and now it's been 3 years that our publishing house exists, and we have 6 of them, and we have our small warehouse, and we have accountant office and lawyers who deal with paperwork, and we have a lot of hired ladies who help us deal with any section of the work, and it makes the whole thing a lot easier for me. Everything changed at the point where I felt really lonely, and I felt like as if it's just me who's dealing with the whole business thing. When my team members flee into other countries, I felt really lonely. But then I worked with a very nice lady who was coaching me, and she said, okay, you have a lot of expectations. You expect other people to read your minds. What if you try verbalizing? What if you try saying, guys, I need help. I think I'm done with this. Could you help me with that? And maybe having less expectation, delegating more, and speaking of your needs. And also, I tried to focus on those people who actually stayed in the project and who actually devoted a lot of their time and energy to this publishing house together with me. And that helped me just to shift the focus from, oh, I'm so poor, I'm also lonely, to I have many people who do this, and we just will continue doing this. So yeah, we are growing, and it's still a challenge, but a challenge is good because it makes you think. it makes you think about the possibilities, about how to do things in a more efficient way. And one of the most difficult things for me was I had this stereotypical view that if the war comes, everything stops. And I was very much worried that the publishing sphere would just stop because people don't read books, and people, a lot of printing houses that were based in Kharkiv, for instance, all of them were closed, and a lot of them were ruined at first months of the war, a large-scale war. But then it revived, and we realized that a lot of people actually read books and they buy books. and everything is fine. So we move in small steps, but sometimes small step is better than just, standing at standpoint.
Yeah, you said to me once, books right now, people need flashlights and warm socks, and they don't need books, but they're buying them. And I'll never
Yes.
forget you telling me, describing to me how much people wanted to still be together, and whenever it felt safe to do so, gathering and over coffee or over a glass of wine, and just really celebrating those small moments. And sometimes that was over books. And that just gave me such a warm feeling. And I think it's important. And I hope everybody on this call can realize and in some way try to put ourselves into that place of, if you're living in a war zone and you never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. And yet in the Ukraine, again, people are finding all these moments to be together. And I remember you saying, and then when it's quiet out, then we go out and we buy flowers and we bring them to our friends. And it just gave me such a different view, other than what I was reading in the paper of what life is like there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking today, because it's summertime, it's over, and we're expecting autumn and winter soon. And we're having this forecast. What kind of autumn will we have? Will there be blackouts again? And like Ukrainians are ready, we're tough. And, I know that the Russians, they probably thought that by shelling our cities and ruining our lights and homes, they would make us weaker. But somehow, instead of that, by gathering, in a small dark places with a little candlelight, we were sharing stories, singing, singing songs, laughing, having these very special moments, helping each other, helping neighbors. We became stronger. And this is a miracle. This is, to me, something very special. And this is why I love Ukrainians so much. And I understand this being invincible. Because being invincible is not about bravado. It's about very small things. It's about the superpower to remain a human being at all costs, to be human. People were not stealing anything, even though there were no lights, no, burglar alarms or anything like that. People were not stealing. People were just like flashlights themselves, It was very nice period of time. Despite the darkness, we could see that people were like flashlights. And this gives me so much hope for all of this.
Thank you, Slava. So though I have more questions, I do want to make sure that we're creating space for anybody who's on this to write your own question if you have one in the chat. And if we don't, I'm just going to keep asking because I have so many more. And I know Cheryl, I think, has one as well. So anyone, if you would like to ask Slava a question, please do just write it in the chat.
Yes, I already see the question from Arthur Combs. What is my dearest ambition in my enterprise, and what does it look like in 10 years, and whether we will reopen the space, and what resources will we need? We have already started. Thank you for this wonderful question. It gives me so much hope for the future. We actually very much want to reopen Creative Women's Space, and we want to have the beautiful bookstore and the coffee shop and the wonderful spacey area for all the women to come and just lead any kind of event they want. But we're still hesitating because we're still having those missiles. And in order to open space right now at wartime, you need to be so sure. You need the bomb shelter. You have all the necessary equipment, and the building is not, I don't know, I start having many questions. But I know that this war, no matter how brutal, how bloody it is, it will be over one day. And once it is over, we will be ready to rebuild And if there is a need to go into smaller towns and open little spaces there, we'll find the resources. I know how much the community of the people are ready to help anytime. So if I don't have a vision of 10 years. It is unfortunately way too far into the future. But I do see our publishing house, as a very successful player on the publishing sphere in Ukraine. And I want to publish more books translated, and those by Ukrainian authors, women authors. And I want to have this space for the women, because one of the most valuable feedbacks we have ever received from those people who came to our space was like this: it's very comfortable to be yourself, to be myself here. And I think that's worth trying. We'll try to build the place for women empowerment, and the place that anyone could just be comfortable being there.
Oh, Cheryl, you're muted.
Yeah, it looks like there's a question also from Sarah. Who are some of your favorite authors and books? Which is a question I had asked Slava earlier as well. I wish we could, if your books were in English, I would have them in my store, Slava, but they're not. So probably what we're looking for are your favorite Ukrainian authors, particularly women authors, and perhaps something even that I could stock in my store. I think to add on to Sarah's question, I think so many of us are anxious to read Ukrainian history and about the war, and about one that I have liked is the one I shared with you, I Will Die in a Foreign Land. It's about the conflicts in 2013, 2014, but it resonates very loudly today as well. But tell us what your favorites are.
I absolutely love reading and even more listening to Oksana Zabushko, and she's one of the top selling authors in Ukraine, and she is now one of the strongest women's voices out there in Europe, because what she does is she goes everywhere and talks about the nature of this war, why all of this happens. So she has this wonderful little book which is called The Longest Journey. And I absolutely recommend you to read this book, because it's been translated into so many languages, and I believe there's an English version of it too. The Longest Journey by Oksana Zabushko is a collection. It's like a little essay which tells about why we are fighting this war and why the world needs the Ukrainian victory, but not the Russian one. It is an absolutely nice peep into the historical background, because Ukraine has been fighting this war not for 10 years. This war has not started in 2014. We've been fighting this war for more like 300 years, and our enemy is the same, unfortunately, the imperial big monster who says that we have no right to exist. But I'm sorry, but we object. We have our language, we have our culture, we have our history, we are independent, we have our voices, and we want our voices to be heard. We are not a part of Russia. And this is what Oksana Zabushko is explaining in her little book. I also advise you to read Tanya Malyarchuk. She is based in Germany. I love her books immensely, and I believe that they have been translated into many languages as well. Sofia Andruchovich. And if you read poetry, I would absolutely recommend you Katerina Kalitko, because her poems are so pulsating and so true. And I think why we need poetry, because sometimes we're lost for words. We really cannot find words to describe what's going on, because so much pain happens. For instance, right before this call, I had a meeting with my friend who lost her husband at the front line a couple of weeks ago. I was present at the funeral, and I cannot even describe you what it feels like. They were such a happy family, and they would have had a great life together. But because of this brutal war, because someone came into this land and started doing all of these terrible things, she lost her husband. So yeah, it's it's not easy, but maybe by reading these books and catching the glimpse into the history of Ukraine, you get to understand our need to be independent better.
Thank
Yes.
you, Slava. So Fred also asked, just to carry on, in addition to reading these books, what can people in the United States do to help the Ukrainians? I know there have been many relief efforts, and myself included. Many people have given money to different organizations, but from someone who's there on the front lines, what would mean the most? And maybe just sort of your call to action for all of us.
Thank you so much for all the help that you've already shared and you've already given. And we appreciate it so much that I cannot even find words. And my gratefulness is really big, because I understand that Ukraine as a country was surprised by this war. We were not totally ready. We did not expect it to happen. So without this help, we would have been destroyed by now. How could Americans help? By giving it a word, by not letting the country and the whole world have this Ukraine fatigue, Ukraine war fatigue. Because I know that for many people who do not understand what's going on, it's just another conflict, but it's not. So the more you talk, the more people just keep talking about it, donating, because any dollar, any hryvnia is very vitally important. And another thing, I got very worried because it's a very important thing for me. There's this very popular thought. There's this idea that if you don't give weapon to Ukraine, the war will end tomorrow. This is unfortunately so not true. All we need now is weapon, because if a killer breaks into your home and starts raping your relatives and your dearest people, starts doing very bad things, you do not sit at that round table and you do not have a conversation with him. You take a weapon and you protect your home and your people. We are in a position as a country that there's no chance for us to lose. If we lose, we die. If we don't get weapon, a lot of people will die. But Ukrainians are very stubborn, and we always had this, people's armies. We always, if we don't have weapon, we will construct anything and we will keep fighting, because we so much don't want to become the part of Russia that you cannot possibly imagine. So just speak up, donate, share a word, and that would be enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Slava. I'm just going to add, because I know Slava won't say this herself, but if anybody wants to support Slava and her enterprise directly, her publishing house has a website, has a way to donate, and it costs them roughly $5,000 US to publish a book. And I know that she has many ideas with her team of the next books. And I remember when we were talking, you're saying one of your dreams is you want to eventually be able to have these translated in English, which we would love. And so I'm going to share the link in here too. So if people want to, that would be incredible, because it's hard to raise the money and it doesn't cost a lot from our perspective to publish a book. But thank you for sharing that, Slava.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Are there any other questions from any of our participants? Is there anyone who would like to be unmuted and say something? And Cynthia, you might have additional questions, or
I have one more. Slava, take a moment. And I know, again, there are no words either to describe having this conversation with a fabulous woman who I admire so much, and then just keep reminding myself, you're there, and all these things are your reality. And as you said, you were just at a friend's funeral whose husband died on the front lines. I'm sure this is part of a regular occurrence for you, and it's hard for us to imagine. And sadly, there is always another crisis in the world. And we all read about them, and it's good to be connected. But as you're saying we have to not be fatigued and not forget that this is the reality that's happening every day. But, along with the book that you shared with us earlier, I don't know if this is the one you showed because the photo was in Ukrainian, What She Is Silent About. I think that is. But you also told me you all published one called What He Is Silent About. This one, in my dream, is published in English, and I would love to find a way to bring that to a lot of places. But I want to hear from you. Please just share with everybody what that one is, if you would.
It's so interesting because we call our publishing a feministic publishing house. And so when we announced that there would be What He's Silent About, people started asking questions. What? Why are you giving place for the man to talk? You call yourself a feministic publishing house. What's that? What's wrong with you? And nothing is wrong with us. We believe in the healthy dialogue between women and men. And in order to have this ecological, healthy dialogue, not to compete with each other, but just try to hear and understand each other, we need books and we need experiences that are shared. So that's why our idea was, in the modern society, there's a lot of pressure on women, of course, but there's also a lot of pressure on men because they are the breadwinners. They need to earn money. They need to have expensive cars and watches, and they need to earn a lot. And they don't need to disbehave. They don't need to look feminine or anything. There are many expectations towards the man. So we thought, what if we talk to men who are activists and who are leaders and just ordinary men and ask them, what are you silent about? Is there an uncomfortable topic that has never been discussed, but you want to talk about? And a lot of men actually refused. And that's an interesting thing. Not all men are ready to talk on some uncomfortable issues connected with their relationship, their career, their body, or any other experience. But we managed to find 50 men who did talk. And we were surprised because we have two books, the collection of women's stories and the collection of men's stories. And you see that the man's book is thicker. They have a lot more to share, and their stories are absolutely very truthful, very vulnerable, and we were impressed by how open they were to talk. They were not afraid of being vulnerable.
I am so impressed with you I'm guessing that the Ukrainian society is a bit more patriarchal than even ours,
Yes.
probably a lot more so. And I'm so proud of you as a woman for taking this on and for sharing your entrepreneurial journey. But I think what resonates with me even more is that you are publishing women writers, and we have many publishing houses over here who focus on that. One called She Wrote over in Berkeley. But for you to do this in the Ukraine is just almost revolutionary. And you're such a pioneer, and you're setting such an exemplary example for other women, and you're educating people. I mean, reading books is about literacy and learning and education and being informed. And you are on the forefront of that in the Ukraine. So I'm overwhelmed by your experience and your entrepreneurial journey. It's so heartwarming, and your resilience, the Ukrainians people, incredible resilience with this war is,
Thank you so much.
I love to hear that it's, instead of breaking you down, it's building you up, it's bringing you closer and it's making you stronger. And we pray that continues.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cheryl.
So
you,
Cynthia, I don't know if you want closing remarks or anything. I'm just so happy for you, Cynthia, putting this together. Thank you. And for you being with us, Slava. It's really remarkable to think that they're in Kyiv and we're here in the San Francisco Bay Area listening to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody, and of course, Slava, and I think you all can see why I was so inspired by her, though I was asked to be her mentor and I gave support and guidance when I could, but just as much I learned from speaking to her every single time and feeling like, my God, what do I have to complain about? When she's here talking to me about the reality, and every time we spoke, it was something else and something terrible happening. And yet there she is, you know, it's not just pursuing her dream. We talked a lot about mission and what her bigger mission is. You know, the publishing house is just a way to get to it. And when we talk about gender norms, of course, it's expectations of women and of men. And, you know, really this is about how everybody can be liberated by these thoughts and feelings of people's value that is really oppressive for everybody. And I'm just so honored, Slava, to continue to have this conversation with you. I want to thank you. And as I'm looking at your face on the screen, I'm just hoping, and I've said this to you before, that one of these days you'll be here in Sausalito. And we'll have another event like this, and it will be live. But so some people asked for all those beautiful names that none of us can spell of these authors. Just send them to us by email. We'll share them. Everybody who's here on Zoom, we will give you the list of these books, and I can't wait to read them. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Cheryl, again, to you for hosting this, and those of you who are here for your Saturday morning. I hope that it left you feeling, or it leaves you feeling just energized in your own way. And Slava, as always, so wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I was so happy to get a mentor like you. I really am happy. You inspired me you cannot even imagine in what possible ways. And I still hold on to some of the words you've told me during those blackouts when I was using my flashlight. Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I know the time is very much valued, and your Saturday morning that you've spent with us today in this little circle. Thank you. Cheryl, good luck with your business. I think the business connected with books is a blessing, really, because books change the lives of so many people and they make happy so many people. So good luck on that.
I could not have said it better, Slava. Thank you. They're very, we share that passion, all of us, I think. And we will get you the names of the books that she recommended. Yes. This is also going to go on our YouTube page if you'd like to share the exchange with other people. I'll give everyone that link when we've got it up and running and live. But thank you again, everyone. What an inspirational hour we've just had. And we look forward to seeing you here in Sausalito, Slava. We'll make that happen. We'll make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.